She was 85 years old. Her hands were trembling. Her white wedding gown hung loosely on her frail body. And as the last guest walked out of that reception hall, Mama Evelyn sat alone at her table, waiting for a groom who should never have left her side. His name was Jaden. He was 25 years old, and just 3 hours earlier, he had stood before God and witnesses and promised to love her until death do them part. But now his chair was empty. The hall was silent. The flowers on the table were already beginning to wilt. Mama Evelyn's eyes searched the room, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing with questions she was too afraid to answer. Where was he? Why had he disappeared? And what had she done wrong? Then she heard it, a door creaking open behind her. Slowly, painfully, she turned her head. And when she saw what was standing in that doorway, her face went white, her lips parted, but no sound came out. What happened in the next 60 seconds would change everything. And if you think you have seen strange marriages before, what you are about to hear will make you question everything you believe about love, loyalty, and the hidden battles people fight behind closed doors. Why would a 25-year-old man marry a woman 60 years older than him? Was it love? Was it money? Or was it something far more complicated, something that most people would never understand unless they knew the full story? What secret was Mama Evelyn protecting? What truth had she carried alone for decades, a truth so heavy that it bent her spine and lined her face with worry? And what discovery forced a young man named Jaden to make the most shocking decision of his life? This story is not about age. It is not about scandal. It is not about what the neighbors whispered or what the newspapers printed. This story is about survival. It is about sacrifice. It is about a debt that stretched across generations and the two unlikely souls who came together to settle it once and for all. By the time you hear what really happened behind those closed doors, you will never look at an old woman the same way again. You will never judge a young man's choices without asking what he might be carrying. And you will understand that sometimes the most powerful love stories are the ones that nobody sees coming. Before we go any deeper into this story, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click on that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Mama Evelyn was born in 1938 in a small town in rural Georgia, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and secrets had a way of staying buried for generations. Her father was a farmer who worked land that had been in the family since Reconstruction. Her mother was a midwife who delivered more than 300 babies over the course of her life, walking miles through mud and rain to reach women in labor, never turning anyone away, never asking for more than people could afford to pay. Evelyn was the youngest of 6 children, and from the time she could walk, she followed her mother on those long journeys to bring new life into the world. By the time she was 16, Evelyn had already helped deliver dozens of babies herself. She had held the hands of frightened young mothers. She had whispered prayers over infants who came into the world too early, too small, too fragile to survive. And she had learned the most important lesson her mother ever taught her, that life was precious, that every person mattered, and that the measure of a soul was not what they accumulated, but what they gave away. Evelyn married young, just 18 years old, to a man named Walter who worked at the local sawmill. They built a life together in a small house on the edge of town, close enough to hear the church bells on Sunday morning, far enough from the main road to have peace and quiet. They had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and for 27 years they were happy, not rich, not famous. Not important by any measure the world would recognize, but happy in the way that matters most, the kind of happiness that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be, with exactly the people you are supposed to be with. Then came the summer of 1983. Walter was killed in an accident at the sawmill. A chain snapped, a log fell, and in the space of a single heartbeat, Evelyn went from wife to widow. She was 45 years old, her children were grown, and suddenly the house that had been filled with laughter and noise was silent. Evelyn grieved, she wept. She spent long nights sitting on the porch, staring at the stars, asking God why he had taken her husband so soon. But she did not break. She could not break, because there were people who still needed her. and Mama Evelyn had never turned her back on anyone who needed help. Jaden Michael Thompson was born in 1998 in Atlanta, Georgia, in a hospital room where his mother lay alone because his father had walked out 3 months before the due date. His mother, a woman named Denise, was 19 years old, working 2 jobs and barely surviving. She loved Jaden with everything she had. She worked double shifts so he could have new shoes for school. She went without meals so he could eat. And every night, no matter how tired she was, she read him a story before bed because she wanted him to know that somewhere out there, beyond the cramped apartment and the unpaid bills and the constant struggle, there was a world full of possibility waiting for him. But love was not enough to hold back the tide of misfortune that seemed determined to drown them both. When Jaden was 7 years old, his mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. At first, the symptoms were manageable: fatigue, numbness in her hands, difficulty walking after long days on her feet. But the disease progressed faster than anyone expected. By the time Jaden was 12, his mother could no longer work. By the time he was 15, she could no longer walk without assistance. And by the time he graduated from high school, Jaden had become something that no 18-year-old should ever have to become: the sole caregiver for a parent who could not care for herself. Jaden did not go to college. He could not afford it, and even if he could, he would never have left his mother alone. Instead, he got certified as a home health aide and started working for a local agency that provided care for elderly patients. The pay was not much, but it was enough to keep the lights on and the rent paid. And more importantly, it taught Jaden skills that would serve him well in the years to come. He learned how to bathe someone who could not bathe themselves. He learned how to cook meals that met specific dietary requirements. He learned how to sit with someone in pain and simply be present, not trying to fix anything, not offering empty words of comfort, just being there. He learned that caring for another human being was not a burden, it was an honor. When the agency assigned him to work with an elderly woman named Evelyn Patterson, Jaden had no idea that his life was about to change forever. He thought it was just another job. He thought she was just another patient. He had no way of knowing that the frail old woman waiting for him in that small house on the edge of town held secrets that connected their families in ways neither of them could have imagined. The first time Jaden walked into Mama Evelyn's house, he noticed 3 things. First, the smell. It was not the usual old person smell of mothballs and medicine. It smelled like fresh bread and lavender, warm and welcoming, like a grandmother's kitchen on a Sunday afternoon. Second, the photographs. They covered every wall, every shelf, every available surface. Black and white pictures of people in their Sunday best. Faded color photographs from the 70s and 80s. Recent snapshots of children and grandchildren who had clearly moved far away and rarely visited. And third, the woman herself. Mama Evelyn was sitting in a rocking chair by the window when Jaden came in, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her dark skin lined with decades of laughter and tears. She was small, probably no more than 5 feet tall, and thin in the way that old people become thin when their bodies start to give out. But her eyes were sharp, clear, full of an intelligence that age had not dimmed. "You must be Jaden," she said, her voice stronger than he expected. "Come sit down. I just made tea." They talked for 3 hours that first day. Jaden was supposed to be assessing her needs, making a care plan, doing all the official things his agency required. But Mama Evelyn was not interested in being assessed. She wanted to know about him. Where was he from? Who were his people? What did he dream about when he closed his eyes at night? And Jaden, who had spent years keeping his walls up, who had learned not to get too close to patients because getting close meant getting hurt when they died, found himself opening up to this strange old woman in ways he never had with anyone else. He told her about his mother, about the disease that was slowly stealing her away, about the guilt he carried for not being able to do more, for not being able to fix what was broken. Mama Evelyn listened without interrupting, and when he was finished, she reached out and took his hand. Her skin was papery and soft, but her grip was firm. "You are a good son," she said, "the best kind of son. And I want you to know something. God sees what you are doing. He sees your sacrifice. And one day when you least expect it, He is going to reward you in ways you cannot even imagine." Jaden did not believe in rewards. He had stopped believing in fairness a long time ago. But something about the way Mama Evelyn said those words made him want to believe. And so he stayed. He kept coming back day after day, week after week, not because the agency paid him to, but because this old woman had become the closest thing to a family he had ever known. 6 months after Jaden started working with Mama Evelyn, she collapsed in her kitchen. One moment she was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of soup. The next moment she was on the floor, her body convulsing, her eyes rolled back in her head. Jaden called 911 and rode with her in the ambulance to the hospital, holding her hand the entire way, praying to a God he was not sure he believed in anymore. The doctors ran tests for 3 days. When they finally came back with the results, their faces told Jaden everything he needed to know before they even opened their mouths. Cancer. Stage 4. It had started in her lungs and spread to her liver, her bones, her lymph nodes. The doctors said she had maybe 6 months, maybe less. There was nothing they could do except make her comfortable. Mama Evelyn took the news with a calmness that Jaden could not understand. She thanked the doctors. She asked when she could go home, and she never once cried, at least not in front of anyone else. But Jaden noticed changes in her after that. She became secretive. She started locking drawers that had always been open. She made phone calls late at night, speaking in hushed tones, hanging up quickly whenever Jaden came into the room. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she would sit at her desk and burn papers in a small metal bin, the flames casting shadows on her face as decades of memories turned to ash. Jaden wanted to ask her what was wrong. He wanted to help, but every time he tried to bring it up, Mama Evelyn changed the subject. She would smile that gentle smile of hers and say something like, "Don't you worry about an old woman's business. You have enough on your plate." And Jaden would let it go, because he did not want to push, because he respected her privacy, because he did not know that the secrets she was protecting were about to explode into both of their lives. It happened on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the diagnosis. Jaden had just finished making dinner, a simple meal of baked chicken and vegetables, the kind of food Mama Evelyn could still keep down. They were sitting at the kitchen table, eating in comfortable silence, when Mama Evelyn set down her fork and looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. Fear, desperation, and underneath it all, a flicker of hope so fragile it looked like it might shatter at any moment. "Jaden," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say no." Jaden put down his own fork. His heart was suddenly beating very fast. "What is it, Mama Evelyn?" She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out an envelope. It was old and yellowed, the paper soft from years of handling. She placed it on the table between them, but did not open it. "I need you to marry me," she said. Jaden thought he had misheard her. He thought it was a joke, some strange old person humor he did not understand. But Mama Evelyn was not laughing. Her eyes were deadly serious. "I know how it sounds," she continued. "I know what people will say. But this is not about romance. This is not about love in the way the world understands it. This is about survival. Mine and yours. And if you let me explain, if you read what is in this envelope, I believe you will understand why I am asking you to do something that seems impossible." Jaden stared at the envelope. His hands were trembling. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to get up and walk away, to tell this old woman that she had lost her mind, to go back to his life and pretend this conversation had never happened. But he did not move. He could not move, because deep down, in a place he did not like to examine too closely, he knew that Mama Evelyn would never ask him something like this without a reason, a real reason, a reason that might change everything. "What's in the envelope?" he asked. Mama Evelyn pushed it toward him. "The truth," she said, "a truth that has been waiting 60 years to be told. Open it, Jaden, and then decide if you are willing to help an old woman finish what should have been finished a long time ago." Jaden opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were several sheets of paper, some typed, some handwritten, all of them old and fragile. There was also a photograph, a black and white photograph of a young man in work clothes, standing in front of a truck, smiling at the camera like he had his whole life ahead of him. Jaden did not recognize the man. But something about his face, something about the shape of his eyes and the curve of his jaw, felt strangely familiar. That man's name was Samuel, Mama Evelyn said. He worked for my family back in 1962, helping my father on the farm. He was 23 years old. He had a wife and a baby son back in Atlanta, and he was one of the kindest, most honorable men I have ever known. Her voice cracked, and for the first time since Jaden had known her, he saw tears forming in her eyes. He was also your grandfather's father, your great-grandfather, Jaden, and in the summer of 1962, he was murdered, right here on this land, by men who were never brought to justice. Jaden felt the room tilt around him. His great-grandfather? He had never known anything about his great-grandfather. His family history was a blank page, full of gaps and silences and questions that nobody ever answered. "I don't understand," he said. "What does this have to do with you? With us?" Mama Evelyn took a deep breath. Samuel was killed because he witnessed something he should not have seen. A group of powerful men in this town, men from an old family named Patterson, were involved in something terrible, something they wanted to keep hidden. Samuel saw what they did, and they killed him for it. But before he died, he came to my family. He gave my father a box full of documents, evidence of what those men had done, and he made my father promise to keep it safe until the day it could be used to bring them down. She paused, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. My father kept that promise. He buried the box on this property and never told a soul where it was. When he died, he passed the secret to me, and I have protected it for 60 years, Jaden. 60 years of watching and waiting. 60 years of keeping my head down and my mouth shut while the Patterson family grew richer and more powerful, while they used their money and influence to erase Samuel's murder from history. But now I am dying, and if I die without protecting this land, without ensuring that someone I trust inherits everything, the Pattersons will tear this property apart. They will find those documents, and they will destroy the only evidence that could ever bring them to justice. Jaden stared at the photograph in his hand, the young man smiling at the camera, his great-grandfather, a man he had never known existed. "Why marriage?" or he asked. "Why can't you just give me the documents now?" "Because it is not just about the documents," Mama Evelyn said. "It is about the land. This land has been in my family for over 100 years. It is protected by laws that say it can only pass to a spouse or a direct descendant. I have no direct descendants left. My children are gone. My grandchildren have signed papers renouncing any claim to the property. If I die without a spouse, the land goes into probate. The courts will take over. And the Pattersons have judges in their pocket, lawyers who will find ways to delay and obstruct until they get what they want. But if I have a surviving spouse, someone I have legally married, that person inherits everything immediately. No probate, no court battles, no opportunity for interference." She reached across the table and took Jaden's hand. "I am not asking you to love me," she said. "I am asking you to protect me, to protect this land, and to finish what Samuel started 60 years ago. He died trying to do the right thing. Help me make sure his death was not in vain. If this story has your heart racing right now, type 'I'm still watching' in the comments. Let us see who is following this all the way to the end, and ask yourself this question. If you were in Jaden's shoes, if a dying woman asked you to marry her to protect a secret that could bring justice to your own family, what would you do? Would you say yes? Would you walk away? Think about it, and keep watching, because what happens next will shock you even more. Jaden said yes. He did not know if he was making the right decision. He did not know if he was being brave or foolish, but something in his gut, something deeper than logic or reason, told him that this was what he was supposed to do, that his whole life, every struggle and every sacrifice had been leading him to this moment. When word got out that a 25-year-old man was going to marry an 85-year-old woman, the reaction was exactly what you would expect. Neighbors who had known Mama Evelyn for decades suddenly started whispering behind her back. People at the grocery store stared and pointed. Anonymous letters appeared in her mailbox, calling her a fool, calling Jaden a gold digger, calling them both names that do not bear repeating. But the cruelest reaction came from people who should have known better. Relatives Jaden had never met, Distant cousins and great aunts, who had never once visited Mama Evelyn, suddenly appeared at her door demanding explanations. They accused Jaden of manipulating a sick old woman. They threatened to call Adult Protective Services. They said they would contest the marriage in court and have it annulled. Mama Evelyn faced them all with a dignity that Jaden could only admire. She stood in her doorway, small and frail, but somehow unbreakable, and told them that she had made her decision, that Jaden was the only person who had shown her genuine kindness in years, and that if they did not leave her property immediately, she would call the police and have them removed. But it was not just relatives they had to worry about. The Patterson family had heard about the upcoming wedding too, and they were not happy. 2 days before the ceremony, a man showed up at Mama Evelyn's door. He was tall and well-dressed with gray hair and cold eyes. He introduced himself as a lawyer representing the Patterson family interests. He said he wanted to have a friendly conversation about the future of the property. Mama Evelyn did not let him inside. She stood on her porch with Jaden beside her and told the lawyer that she had nothing to say to him or anyone else from the Patterson family. The lawyer smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, "I hope you know what you're doing. The people I represent have a long memory, and they do not take kindly to interference in their affairs." After he left, Mama Evelyn sat down heavily in her rocking chair. Her hands were shaking. For the first time, Jaden saw real fear in her eyes. "They know," she whispered. "They know what I'm planning, and they will do anything to stop it." The wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon in Mama Evelyn's living room. The guest list was small by necessity: a pastor from the local church, 2 witnesses, and Jaden's mother, who had insisted on being there despite her illness. Denise had listened to her son explain the situation over the phone, and instead of judging him, instead of telling him he was crazy, she had simply said, "If this is what God is calling you to do, then you do it, and you do it with your whole heart." Mama Evelyn wore a white dress she had owned for 30 years, let out and adjusted to fit her shrunken frame. Jaden wore his only suit, the same one he had worn to job interviews and funerals. They stood facing each other in front of the fireplace. And when the pastor asked if they would honor and cherish each other for as long as they both should live, they both said yes without hesitation. There was no reception, no dancing, no champagne toasts. After the ceremony, everyone ate sandwiches and cake in the kitchen, and then the guests left, and Mama Evelyn and Jaden were alone. That night, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. Mama Evelyn reached over and took Jaden's hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "You have given an old woman something she thought she would never have again. Hope." Jaden squeezed her hand gently. "We're in this together now," he said. "Whatever happens, we face it together." They sat in silence as darkness fell, neither of them knowing that the danger they feared was already closer than they thought. That even as they sat there holding hands, someone was watching them from the shadows, and that before the night was over, everything was about to change. It happened around midnight. Jaden had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room, exhausted from the stress of the day. Mama Evelyn had gone to bed hours earlier, and the house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then Jaden heard it, a sound that did not belong, the creak of floorboards, the soft click of a door being opened. He sat up slowly, his heart pounding, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Through the window, he could see a car parked at the end of the driveway with its lights off. And moving through the shadows of the backyard, flashlights cutting through the night, were 3 figures heading toward the old oak tree behind the house. Jaden's blood ran cold. The oak tree. That was where Mama Evelyn had told him the documents were buried. Somehow the Pattersons knew. They had found out, and they were here to destroy the evidence before it could ever see the light of day. Jaden did not think. He acted. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911 as he ran toward the back door. But before he could reach it, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks, a scream. Mama Evelyn's voice, crying out in fear and pain. He changed direction and ran to her bedroom. The door was open. Inside, he found Mama Evelyn on the floor, clutching her chest, her face contorted in agony. A man was standing over her, the same lawyer who had come to the house 2 days before. In his hand was an envelope, the same yellowed envelope that Mama Evelyn had shown Jaden at the kitchen table. "Give me the rest," the lawyer was saying, his voice cold and flat. "Tell me where you buried them, and this ends peacefully. Refuse and things get very unpleasant for you and your young husband." Jaden did not hesitate. He threw himself at the lawyer, catching the man off guard, knocking him to the floor. The envelope went flying. Jaden heard shouts from outside, heard the sound of sirens in the distance, heard Mama Evelyn gasping for breath behind him. Everything became a blur of motion and noise. Police cars screaming up the driveway, officers pouring into the house, the lawyer being dragged away in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. And through it all, Jaden kneeling beside Mama Evelyn, holding her hand, begging her to hold on. Mama Evelyn survived that night, but just barely. The stress had triggered a massive heart attack on top of her existing cancer. The doctors said it was a miracle she was still alive, but Mama Evelyn just smiled weakly and said, "It's not my time yet. I still have work to do." The police investigation that followed uncovered everything. The documents buried under the oak tree, the 60-year cover-up, the murder of Samuel Thompson and the conspiracy to hide it. The Patterson family lawyer was arrested and charged with breaking and entering, assault, and conspiracy. And in the weeks that followed, as more evidence came to light, several members of the Patterson family themselves were implicated in crimes stretching back decades. The story made national news. Reporters descended on the small town, cameras and microphones everywhere. Everyone wanting to know about the 85-year-old woman who had waited 60 years to expose a murder and the 25-year-old man who had married her to help her do it. But Jaden refused most interviews. This was not about fame or attention. This was about justice. Justice for Samuel Thompson. Justice for all the people the Pattersons had hurt over the years. And justice for Mama Evelyn, who had carried this burden alone for so long. One evening, about 2 weeks after the incident, Jaden was sitting beside Mama Evelyn's hospital bed. She was weak, barely able to speak above a whisper, but her eyes were peaceful in a way he had never seen before. "You did it," she said softly. "You finished what Samuel started." Jaden shook his head. "We did it," he said. "Together." Mama Evelyn smiled. "Your great-grandfather would be so proud of you. I wish you could have known him. He was a good man, the best kind of man, the kind who does what is right even when it costs him everything." She closed her eyes. "I'm tired, Jaden, so tired. But for the first time in 60 years, I can finally rest." Mama Evelyn died 3 weeks later, peacefully in her sleep, with Jaden holding her hand. Her last words were a prayer, thanking God for sending her a protector when she needed one most, thanking him for allowing her to see justice done before she passed, and asking him to bless Jaden with the same courage and kindness that had defined his great-grandfather's life. The funeral was standing room only. People came from all over the county to pay their respects. Many of them strangers who had read about Mama Evelyn's story in the news and wanted to honor a woman who had shown such extraordinary bravery. Jaden spoke at the service. He talked about how he had come to work for Mama Evelyn expecting just another job and found something so much more. A friend, a mentor, a grandmother in every way that mattered. "She taught me that love is not always what we expect," he said, his voice breaking. "Sometimes love is sacrifice. Sometimes love is protection. Sometimes love is sitting with someone in their darkest hour and simply being there. Mama Evelyn loved me like that, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that love." After the funeral, Jaden inherited the property just as Mama Evelyn had intended, but he did not keep it. Instead, he sold the land and used the money to do something that he knew would have made her proud. He built a community health clinic on the outskirts of town, a place where people without insurance could receive medical care regardless of their ability to pay. He named it the Evelyn Patterson Community Health Center, and above the front door, he had a plaque installed with a quote that Mama Evelyn had once said to him: "The measure of a soul is not what they accumulate, but what they give away." Today, the Evelyn Patterson Community Health Center serves thousands of patients every year. It has become a model for community health care, featured in magazines and studied by policy experts trying to understand how one small clinic in rural Georgia could make such a big difference. And every year on the anniversary of Mama Evelyn's death, Jaden visits her grave. He brings flowers. He sits on the grass beside her headstone, and he tells her about everything that has happened since she has been gone. He tells her about his mother, Denise, whose condition has stabilized thanks to treatments she could never have afforded before Jaden came into his inheritance. He tells her about the patients at the clinic, the lives that have been saved, the families that have been helped. And he tells her about the letters he still receives, letters from people all over the country who heard their story and were inspired to do something good in their own communities. Sometimes when the wind blows just right and the sun hits the grass at a certain angle, Jaden swears he can feel Mama Evelyn's presence, her gentle hand on his shoulder, her soft voice in his ear. "You did good," she seems to say. "You did good." And in those moments, Jaden knows that everything he went through, every judgment, every accusation, every sleepless night, was worth it. Because he was part of something bigger than himself, a story that started 60 years before he was born and will continue long after he is gone. A story about justice, about courage, about the unbreakable bonds that connect us across generations, and about an old woman and a young man who proved that love, real love, has nothing to do with age. If you are still watching right now, I want to ask you something. If you were in Jaden's shoes, if a dying woman asked you to marry her to protect a secret that could bring justice to your own family, would you have said yes? Would you have risked everything, your reputation, your future, the judgment of everyone around you to do what was right? And here is another question to think about. Is there someone in your life right now, maybe an elderly neighbor, maybe a family member you have lost touch with, who might be carrying a burden you know nothing about? Someone who might need your help but is too proud or too scared to ask? This story reminds us that the people we overlook, the old woman sitting alone on her porch, the young man working 2 jobs to support his family, often have depths we cannot imagine. They have stories. They have secrets. They have battles they are fighting that we will never see unless we take the time to sit with them, to listen, to truly care. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this one, because we have so many more stories to tell. Stories of courage, stories of sacrifice, stories that will stay with you long after the video ends. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, the greatest love stories are not always the ones that make the headlines. Sometimes they are happening right next door, in quiet rooms between people the world has forgotten. All we have to do is pay attention.